From orbit, I observed them. Tiny shapes clustered on a barren sphere, their colony sprawling across a dull, dusty plain. I had catalogued countless civilizations, studied the rhythms of countless species, but these humans, they defied all expectation. Their structures were laughably fragile, mere sticks and stone against the indifferent sky. No walls, no shields, no strategy beyond the instinct to survive. I recorded their movements, slow, uncoordinated, almost chaotic, a dance of imperfection that should have made them easy prey. Our fleet drifted above them, a constellation of silent precision, weapons gleaming like icicles of annihilation. I could sense the confidence of my kind, the certainty of a species that believed it had mastered the cosmos. We had underestimated humans for centuries. Their weaknesses were obvious: brittle bodies, fragile minds, a tendency to squabble even over survival. Yet even as our assault crafts descended, my sensors picked up an anomaly, a spark, faint but insistent, radiating from their tiny settlement. It was neither heat nor energy in the conventional sense, but something more subtle, vital. A human stepped from a crumbling dwelling, unarmed, vulnerable. He raised his head toward the sky, and for a moment I felt the sheer audacity of it, a silent declaration that they would not yield. Others followed, scattered across the settlement, moving with a quiet, stubborn rhythm. From my perspective, it was poetic. Every flicker of life, every heartbeat against the void, seemed to mock the inevitability of their doom. Were they aware of what loomed above? Perhaps not fully. Perhaps the courage I sensed was instinct alone. Or perhaps it was something more. I catalogued them as they went about simple tasks, collecting water, tending small fires, repairing structures with bare hands. To us, these were acts of futility, gestures insignificant against the machinery of war. And yet, they persisted. There was a rhythm in their chaos, a stubborn continuity that refused to break under the weight of expectation. I could feel it in my sensors, a resonance of life that did not conform to probability. The first of our assault crafts dropped from orbit, glinting as it pierced the thin atmosphere, a warning beacon to the humans, or perhaps a herald of death. Still, they moved with the same calm determination, eyes flicking skyward, unhurried, unbroken. Every sensor reading, every probability calculation suggested they would crumble, and yet the anomaly persisted, as though the planet itself conspired with them, amplifying something elemental in their being: unpredictability, resilience, defiance. I recorded, fascinated, horrified, and in awe. From my vantage above, the humans were fragile, mortal, absurdly small against the vastness of space. As the first blast of our fleet's weapons began to streak toward the colony, I realized their survival was improbable, but perhaps not impossible.
Something in their essence radiated a quiet certainty, and in that moment I could not distinguish fear from courage. The sky above them glowed with the promise of destruction, yet below, humans continued their stubborn rituals. The countdown had begun. The universe had expected their end, and yet something told me that what came next would defy expectation entirely. The silence shattered with a sudden eruption of fire. Our weapons descended like falling stars, striking the colony with precision that should have annihilated every human form in moments. From my sensor pods, I recorded it all. The buildings buckling and splintering under the weight of energy beams, vehicles melting into pools of molten metal, dust and debris thrown into the air like miniature storms. The horizon burned with an orange haze, a chaos of fire and smoke that illuminated the fragile forms below. For a species so small, so inconsequential in our calculations, the humans seemed to occupy the landscape with a stubborn permanence that refused to vanish. At first, I expected panic. I expected the cacophony of terror, shrill cries, and chaotic flight. But what unfolded was unexpected. The humans did not collapse under the onslaught. They did not scatter in blind terror as our plasma and pulse beams scorched the ground beneath them. Instead, they moved with a strange resilience, a mixture of instinct and improvisation that was impossible to predict. One figure, barely more than a child by their reckoning, ran toward a shattered wall, dragging others along with them. They tore metal panels from debris, stacking rubble and charred remnants into crude shields. Every motion was unrefined, haphazard, but together the humans formed a living barrier, a fragile wall against the firestorm raining down from above. I observed in disbelief as the humans adapted. Each strike we landed only seemed to provoke them, not to destroy. A small group of humans dived through clouds of smoke, disappearing into crumbling buildings, only to emerge moments later carrying scorched planks, metal shards, and salvaged machinery. They wove these materials into barricades, improvised weaponry, and defensive positions that confounded our sensors. Their coordination was inconsistent, yet the overall effect was startling. Chaos organizing itself into purpose, disarray giving birth to strategy. From my alien mind, the anomaly was undeniable. These creatures were small, fragile, disorganized, and yet unbreakable. They moved with a reckless intelligence that no algorithm could predict. Where logic suggested retreat, they pressed forward. Where fear should have paralyzed, they improvised with audacity. Our drones strafed the settlement, sweeping through corridors of debris, incinerating anything that moved. And still, the humans persisted. Each scorch mark, each collapsed dwelling, only seemed to strengthen their resolve.
I focused on a single human, no taller than a child in my species' eyes, standing amid a field of ruined buildings. They gestured furiously, guiding others through smoke and ruin, issuing commands that were more instinct than language. Others obeyed without hesitation, lifting beams, tossing debris, and reinforcing their improvised barricades. I tried to predict their actions, to anticipate the next movement, but each human seemed to react simultaneously, yet independently, an organism of singular determination, yet composed of countless minds. Even when our plasma blasts scorched the very ground they had occupied moments before, they returned. No cry of despair, no shattering scream, only a quiet insistence, a pulse of life that refused to break, an echo of defiance against our instruments of annihilation. From my observation pods, I noted the terror and fascination in my sensors. It was terrifying, beautiful in its defiance. Here were creatures facing certain death, yet they moved with a grace that was not elegance, but something deeper, pure survival instinct, amplified by a will that the universe itself could not calculate. The humans exploited every shadow, every ruined wall, every collapsed vehicle. They vanished into debris, only to reappear where we expected nothing. They improvised weapons from shards of metal and scrap electronics, turning destruction into opportunity. Our formations, designed to be flawless, began to falter. My calculations faltered. Every conventional prediction was invalidated by their ingenuity. What should have been a massacre became a display of something alien to us, resilience born not of strength, but of chaotic brilliance. And yet, even as our weapons rained fire, even as the horizon glowed with annihilation, I sensed the spark that had first drawn my attention from orbit, a quiet pulse, subtle but insistent, emanating from the humans. Every hit, every obstacle overcome, only amplified that pulse, until it was almost visible, a rhythm of defiance that shook my sensors and mocked our assumptions. I watched them dive, drag, lift, and shield one another, a dance of survival against impossible odds. By the time the dust settled enough to see through the smoke, I recorded the impossible. Humans had adapted, survived, and even countered in small ways. Where we had expected silence and submission, we found energy and action. Where we had anticipated weakness, we found ingenuity. My mind strained to reconcile the data. These creatures, so small, so fragile, should have been obliterated, and yet their presence endured. It was a terrifying beauty, this capacity to manipulate chance, to stare death in the eye without hesitation. And even as our weapons recalibrated for another strike, I realized that the humans were no longer merely surviving. They were learning. Every hit we landed became a lesson. Every loss, a step toward adaptation. And in that moment, above the burning colony, I felt the first true tremor of unease. The humans were not simply enduring, they were evolving under fire. The next strike would not be the last, but what would meet it? That I could not predict. I tracked them as they moved through the remnants of their colony, small forms darting across the ruins like sparks on a dry field. From my sensors, it was chaos, untrained, uncoordinated, yet somehow impossibly precise. I cataloged every maneuver, every hesitation, every impulsive decision. Nothing in my database could explain their behavior. Conventional logic predicted collapse, yet these humans adapted in real time, improvising with a speed that defied expectation. They used everything at their disposal. Rubble became barricades, shattered machinery became tools of war. One group lifted a collapsed metal wall and, with no formal engineering knowledge, propped it across a narrow alley. Another dragged scorched pipes and scrap wiring to form a tripwire trap. I could see the potential for catastrophe in every gesture, yet each human moved with uncanny timing, turning improvised hazards into defensive assets. Their coordination was strange, silent, fluid, almost instinctive. They communicated through gestures, shouts, and signals that had no formal structure, yet the result was a deadly choreography. I focused on one human, small and lean, gripping a ramshackle launcher cobbled from parts scavenged from vehicles and debris. The creature fired, and a swarm of our drones fell from the sky, circuits fried in bursts of orange sparks. The efficiency was terrifyingly effective, not precise like our weaponry, but devastating nonetheless. A second human approached a collapsed generator, twisting panels, rerouting energy lines, and, without understanding the intricacies of our technology, created a makeshift EMP that disabled another squad of assault drones. I recorded every moment, awe merging with a creeping fear I had never anticipated. From my perspective, this was madness. Chaotic minds acting without discipline, improvising weapons with no prior training, yet achieving results that rivaled our most sophisticated systems. They learned from loss with alarming speed. One collapsed barricade became the template for the next. One failed attempt at firing a salvaged launcher inspired a dozen new variations. Each small victory radiated outward, a shockwave of defiance against the algorithms of destruction we had unleashed. Their ingenuity was not systematic. It had no order, no premeditated structure. It was raw, instinctive, a brilliance born of necessity. I watched as a group redirected water pumps to create makeshift flamethrowers, igniting gas leaks from fractured pipes. Another set used reflective surfaces and broken glass to dazzle our drone sensors, blinding cameras and redirecting laser targeting. Every action, though unpredictable, had impact.
Each human became a node in a network of improvisation, a living system of chaos that could not be anticipated, contained, or fully countered. A particularly audacious human leaped atop a collapsed transport vehicle, waving scraps of metal to draw our drones into the open. Others flanked the approaching machines, tossing debris and igniting fires, forcing the drones to divert and regroup. It was a primitive form of tactical acumen, but effective. I recorded the patterns, trying to identify weaknesses, yet each time I calculated probabilities, the humans altered their movements, adjusting to every circumstance, every strike. They were learning faster than we could destroy. I observed the psychological components as well. Fear was present, but it did not dominate them. Each loss seemed to spark a deeper determination. Where one human fell, another stepped forward without hesitation, assuming the fallen's position. Coordination emerged from chaos, decision-making from instinct, and courage from a collective drive I could not quantify. Even small children, by our standards, carried tools or guided others, their presence amplifying the adaptive network. From above, the colony no longer appeared on the verge of collapse. It was transforming into something else, something unpredictable. Weakness was not defeat here. Fragility had become a weapon, malleable and alive. The humans had turned the rubble and ruin into a battlefield that played to their strengths, exploiting our assumptions at every turn. Each improvised barricade, each calculated risk, each seemingly reckless act added layers of defense we could not penetrate. I could not anticipate the next move, and that uncertainty gnawed at my confidence. These humans had no formal strategy, no standardized tactics, no history of training that could explain their sudden brilliance. And yet every interaction, every adaptation, every strike suggested an underlying principle: survival through ingenuity. Their defiance was not brute strength. It was a force of chaos made coherent through instinct and determination. By the hour's midpoint, I could detect a pattern emerging, not in their actions themselves, but in the overarching logic of their survival. They were unpredictable, yes, but the sum of their improvisations formed a counterintuitive strategy: absorb damage, adapt,
redirect threats, exploit the environment, learn instantly, and repeat. We had the tools, the technology, the cold precision of centuries of warfare. Yet in this battle, we had underestimated a factor we could not measure: human creativity under duress. Even as I recalculated attack vectors, plotted drone strikes, and deployed new squads, the humans adapted faster than we could anticipate. The colony, which I had assumed would fall within minutes, was now a living organism of ingenuity, each human a cell in a network that could not be eradicated through conventional means.
And the more they survived, the more dangerous they became. Not through power, but through unpredictability, resourcefulness, and the relentless force of will. It was awe-inspiring and terrifying. From my observation point, I could see the spark of something elemental. The humans were not merely surviving, they were asserting their presence against annihilation, defining the battle not by strength, but by cunning, creativity, and an almost instinctual intelligence that outpaced our most advanced algorithms. And as one human detonated a makeshift EMP, watching our drones falter in a cascade of sparks and smoke, I realized the truth. We had underestimated them. We had assumed weakness meant inevitability, but the humans, small, fragile, and chaotic, had begun to teach us a lesson the universe itself seemed reluctant to acknowledge. Survival was not determined by power or precision, but by ingenuity, adaptability, and the unbreakable human will. Even as our fleet prepared the next strike, I could not predict how they would respond. They were learning, they were evolving, and the colony, once fragile, insignificant, doomed, was beginning to fight back. The question was no longer if they could survive. The question was, how far could their ingenuity take them before the universe fully understood the anomaly that humans had become? The 7th minute arrived. In the cold precision of our assault algorithms, we expected the inevitable collapse, a swift extinguishing of fragile human life. Instead, what unfolded beneath my observation pods was nothing short of incomprehensible. The humans moved as if choreographed, yet without any visible coordination. Entire squads flowed across the ruined colony like a single organism, weaving through debris, avoiding fire and explosions with an instinctual grace. Panic, which should have consumed them, was absent. Submission, expected in the face of annihilation, was nowhere to be found. Instead, they displayed strategy, improvisation, and a raw cunning that challenged everything we had calculated. Our drones, engineered for perfection, faltered. Pre-programmed assault patterns became liabilities as the humans exploited blind spots in ways I had never predicted. One squad of drones swept down a narrow alley, expecting to crush any resistance. The humans had stacked rubble in seemingly random arrangements, but these obstacles acted as traps, funneling our machines into choke points where EMP charges and improvised explosives lay in wait. Sparks flew, circuits fried, and drones toppled, cascading into one another in a pattern that appeared almost poetic, almost intentional. I focused on a single human, a mid-sized figure, scarred across one cheek, moving with deliberate calm amid chaos. Every other human seemed to orbit around this individual, following subtle gestures and commands that were nearly imperceptible. With a wave of an arm, a trap was triggered. A partial wall collapsed, isolating one of our assault units. A redirected energy beam from a malfunctioning generator struck another squad, forcing a tactical retreat. Each maneuver, though improvised, was devastatingly effective. From my perspective, it was as if the humans understood not only our tactics, but the very psychology of war itself, anticipating responses, manipulating expectations, and exploiting weaknesses we did not know existed. The raw chaos of their improvisation seemed almost magical. I ran simulation after simulation in my analytical course, yet no algorithm could predict the outcomes of their actions. Every action we took to suppress them was met with countermeasures, born not of prior planning, but of instant analysis and adaptation. A burned vehicle became a barricade, shattered energy conduits became traps, fire from damaged infrastructure became a weapon. The humans reshaped the battlefield around themselves, converting the ruins into a living extension of their will. I began to question my assumptions. Were these creatures truly weak, or had we failed to measure the breadth of their resilience? Every strike we launched was not merely resisted, it was inverted, twisted into opportunity by the humans' ingenuity. The colony, which should have been reduced to ash and silence, throbbed with life, with purpose, with defiance. Even from orbit, I could sense it. The planet itself seemed to rise with them, bending around their improvisations, amplifying their power. The wind carried smoke in patterns that concealed their movements,
rubble and ruined vehicles aligned to funnel attackers into traps. It was as if the terrain itself obeyed their will. One human climbed atop a half-collapsed tower, scanning the horizon with eyes that betrayed no fear. Another group below used the fallen structure to redirect a cascading flow of molten metal, creating a temporary barrier that redirected our drone's assault paths. Yet another ignited a series of fuel lines, producing a wall of flame that herded a squad into an exposed kill zone. Each action, independently conceived, created a network of consequences we could not anticipate. The battlefield had become a dynamic organism, and the humans were its heart and mind. I observed the smallest details, the flick of a wrist, the positioning of a foot, the timing of a shout, and realized that what appeared chaotic to the naked eye was something more profound. It was instinct shaped by experience, intelligence without formal training, courage without calculation. They were improvisers, learners, and warriors all at once. Each human contributed to a collective intelligence that no algorithm could comprehend, a fluid, evolving strategy that defied the limits of prediction. And then the first signs of psychological warfare emerged. One human, standing alone in the middle of a collapsed street, waved a charred plank with such confidence that a group of our drones hesitated, recalculating targeting protocols.
Another, barely more than a child, appeared atop a pile of debris, directing others with a series of rapid gestures and shouts that coordinated attacks on multiple fronts simultaneously. From my alien perspective, I felt a tremor of fear. We were confronting a species whose ingenuity and adaptability exceeded every calculation we had made about weakness and mortality. By the 7th minute, the balance of power had shifted. Where once we held the advantage, now the humans dictated terms. Our formations faltered under the unpredictability of their countermeasures. We recalibrated, redeployed, and struck again, only to meet further improvisation. Traps triggered, energy streams redirected, barriers created from nothing. They turned ruins into resources, improvisation into strategy, survival into art. I could no longer view the humans as mere prey. They were something more, a force of nature in miniature, small but incomprehensibly adaptive, a species whose very existence challenged the fundamental assumptions of the universe. And in that moment, as the dust swirled and fires roared, I realized with an alien's disbelief that the colony was no longer simply enduring, it was rising against impossible odds, shaping its environment and defying the inevitable. Our next strike would decide the outcome, but the humans, small, chaotic, and unpredictable, were already several steps ahead. The universe itself seemed to bend around their ingenuity, carrying them toward survival against a storm that should have annihilated them. And as I watched the scarred human issue a silent command to those around them, I understood that the true battle was not yet won, nor fully comprehended. The turning point had arrived. The improbable had become undeniable. The question now was not whether they would survive, but what they would do next. Minute 7. It should have been the end. From my observation pods, I expected silence, ash, and the faint pulse of extinguished life. Instead, what I witnessed was the impossible. The humans, battered and bloody, emerged from wreckage that should have buried them. Shards of metal, scorched rubble, twisted vehicles, they moved through it as if it were an extension of their will, their makeshift weapons raised toward the fallen drones and incapacitated assault crafts that littered the streets. The horizon, once dominated by the clean precision of our fleet, now trembled under the quiet surge of human defiance. Their movements were swift and deliberate, each step calculated in instinct rather than logic. From above, I recorded every detail. A human leaping over a scorched vehicle to slam a molten pipe into a collapsing drone. Another using a fallen energy conduit to redirect a plasma beam into a cluster of disabled units. Each action seemed reckless, yet was devastatingly effective.
What had been chaos, the fractured, improvised movements of scattered survivors, had coalesced into a coordinated counteroffensive that no algorithm, no weapon system, no tactic could have predicted. The streets themselves had become a battlefield sculpted by human ingenuity. Barricades of rubble, splintered metal, and scorched machinery funneled our remaining drones into traps and kill zones. Fire, smoke, and debris became allies, guiding the humans' movements and obstructing ours. Every obstacle I had assumed would hinder them instead became a weapon in their hands. One human climbed atop a collapsed transport module, signaling with a raised arm. Immediately, a group of survivors surged from the shadows, igniting gas lines from fractured pipes and creating walls of flame that corralled our assault units into precise locations for ambush. I focused on the mid-sized human who had led the counteroffensive in the previous minute. Scarred, unbroken, impossibly calm, they moved through the streets with a measured rhythm, issuing gestures and commands that orchestrated the survivors' improvisations into a symphony of destruction. They guided others to improvise traps from wreckage, reroute power from damaged systems, and exploit environmental hazards with a speed that defied calculation.
Every maneuver revealed the depth of their adaptability. What I had once cataloged as chaos was now strategy, raw and fluid, born of instinct and will rather than formal logic. The invaders, the fleets, the drones, the precision strikes, began to falter. We recalibrated, redeployed, fired in succession, yet every strike was countered by human unpredictability. A swarm of drones, sent to clear a sector of rebel, collided mid-air as humans ignited a series of explosions that rerouted the assault path. Another squad of drones fell victim to a makeshift electromagnetic pulse, improvised from a collapsed generator and scrap circuitry. Our supremacy, built over centuries of conquest and precise calculation, was crumbling in the face of raw human adaptability. I felt something unexpected in my alien sensors: awe, fear, disbelief. These humans, small, fragile, mortal, had done what no intelligent species had achieved under similar circumstances. They had survived, not by overwhelming force, not by technological superiority, but by ingenuity, courage, and indomitable will. They were not merely enduring, they were reversing the tide. The colony, once on the brink of annihilation, had become a crucible of human resilience. Every improvised barrier, every trap, every bold maneuver, culminating in the staggering reversal of fortune. The invaders now retreated. From my perspective, it was terrifying and beautiful. The humans did not celebrate with triumphal cries or arrogant gestures. Instead, they moved with quiet determination, checking on each other, reinforcing barricades, tending minor injuries, and scanning for further threats.
Their victory was not about pride, it was about survival, earned through unity, resilience, and relentless willpower. Each human became a node in a living network, reinforcing others' strength, sharing knowledge gained in moments of extreme danger, and amplifying the collective determination of the colony. The streets, once the scene of predicted devastation, now radiated with their energy. Smoke and fire twisted in the wind, reflecting off scorched metal and rubble, casting long, flickering shadows. The humans moved through it all, not as individuals, but as an organism defined by willpower and adaptability. Each small victory fed the next, creating a cascading effect that dismantled our assumptions and erased the boundaries of expectation. Where I had anticipated the collapse of a primitive species, I now saw the emergence of a force that reshaped the battlefield entirely. And yet, even in triumph, there was no hubris. Humans did not linger in victory. They remained vigilant, alert, and aware that survival required constant adaptation. They scavenged, repaired, reinforced, and prepared, each action deliberate, yet infused with the same instinctive precision that had carried them through 7 minutes of near impossible odds. Observing them, I understood the truth for the first time. They are not merely small, fragile creatures. They are anomalies of the universe, capable of bending circumstance to their will. Mortality does not define them, determination does. Fragility does not weaken them, ingenuity strengthens them. As I recorded the aftermath, the enormity of the moment became clear. The humans of this colony had survived an attack that should have annihilated them within minutes. They had rewritten the rules of survival, turning chaos into strategy, vulnerability into strength, and despair into a relentless drive to endure. They had taken the unimaginable and made it reality. As I cataloged the aftermath, the final positions of our units became clear. Drones lay scattered, some still smoldering. Assault crafts retreated, damaged beyond immediate repair. Our formations were fractured, morale faltering. The humans, however, moved through the ruins like shadows of certainty, silent but unyielding, reclaiming their world piece by piece. In that moment, my alien sensors registered something profound. The universe itself seemed to bend around their determination. Minute 7 ended. The impossible had occurred. From destruction rose resilience, from chaos emerged strategy, from fear and fragility bloomed ingenuity. The humans were no longer merely surviving, they were asserting dominion over fate itself, a small, fragile species that had rewritten the laws of probability through courage, adaptability, and unbreakable will. And as I drifted above the colony, recording their quiet triumph, I realized something that no sensor, no algorithm, no calculation had ever suggested. The humans were not only alive, they were extraordinary.
The universe had misjudged them.
The question now was no longer whether they would survive the next assault, but how far the spark of their ingenuity would carry them before the cosmos fully comprehended the anomaly of human resilience. The smoke lifted slowly, curling into the pale sky like the final remnants of a storm. From my vantage above the colony, I drifted silently, observing the humans as they emerged from the wreckage. Their movements were deliberate yet gentle, hands extended to help the wounded, bodies bending to lift debris, small groups working together to rebuild shattered dwellings. Each gesture was precise, practical, and yet imbued with an almost sacred reverence. Their celebration was not triumphant or ostentatious. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, a collective acknowledgement of survival rather than victory. I recorded everything, every glance exchanged between them, every whispered instruction, every improvisation that had carried them through the impossible. Their resilience was not a matter of strength or weaponry. It was something deeper, almost elemental, a pulse of determination that defied measurement. I catalogued the way a child lifted a fragment of metal to reinforce a wall, the way an elder tended to scorched equipment with patient care, the way they scavenged the ruined streets for anything that could be repurposed. It was meticulous, purposeful, and yet infused with a raw, unquantifiable energy. From my alien perspective, it was a revelation. The humans had endured annihilation not through brute force or superior technology, but through sheer will and ingenuity. Each act of rebuilding, each improvised repair, each protective gesture was a testament to a force I had never encountered, a force that no calculation, no predictive model, no weapon system could fully comprehend. They were alive in ways that transcended physical survival. They were alive in spirit, in ingenuity, in defiance. I sensed a message in their persistence, a resonance that reverberated beyond the colony, beyond this planet. The galaxy may have counted them insignificant, weak, primitive, or irrelevant, but here, in the ruins of their home, I witnessed the raw, unyielding power of human spirit. They were catalysts of change, anomalies capable of rewriting the rules of survival and resilience. Each human carried within them the spark of unpredictability, a force that could challenge the assumptions of the universe itself. Even as an outsider, I could not deny it. Humans were not merely survivors. They were architects of possibility, agents of ingenuity, and bearers of hope. And as I recorded the colony, alive and humming with quiet energy, I understood that this was more than a battle won. It was proof that no matter the odds, no matter the force arrayed against them, humans endure.
From above, I watched them bend the broken world to their will, and for the first time I recognized something profound. This fragile, mortal species, so easily underestimated, had become a force that demanded awe. The universe itself seemed to pause in recognition of their resilience, of the anomaly they represented. The humans were small, fragile, and mortal, but in defiance, in ingenuity, in unwavering spirit, they were unstoppable. The ruins lay quiet beneath the twilight sky, yet the colony thrummed with life. From orbit, I watched as humans moved among the scorched buildings and twisted metal, their motions purposeful, deliberate, and undeniably alive. They did more than survive. They adapted, repaired, and reclaimed their world. Each gesture carried a subtle defiance, a refusal to be diminished by the fury that had rained from the stars. Their triumph was not loud. It did not need to be. It resonated in the rhythm of their movements, in the improvisation of their rebuilding, in the quiet murmurs of encouragement exchanged between survivors. I transmitted the full record of the assault back to my home systems, knowing that the data would astound even the most skeptical analysts. Here was a species underestimated by the galaxy, fragile by every measure of physiology, weaponry, and technology, and yet capable of feats that defied expectation. They had turned the tide of annihilation not through strength, but through spirit. Their ingenuity transformed ruin into opportunity, and their courage rendered impossible calculations irrelevant. Each small victory radiated outward, like ripples in the void, a message encoded into the very pattern of existence. Survival is not given, it is earned. Even as distant observers, alien civilizations watching from afar received the transmission, the impact would be felt. The tale of this forgotten colony would ripple across star systems, a warning and a lesson. The galaxy had assumed humans were insignificant, weak, and fragile. Yet here, on a barren world at the edge of the system, a handful of humans had defied annihilation. They had demonstrated that adversity does not extinguish courage, that even the smallest and seemingly weakest creatures can triumph when spirit and ingenuity combine.
I observed them as they tended to the wounded, reinforced barricades, and scavenged for resources. Each action was a testament to resilience, a living proof of the principles that governed human survival. The children moved with quiet confidence, carrying tools and materials as if instinct had taught them strategy. The elders coordinated recovery efforts, improvising solutions with knowledge born from hardship. Even the simplest human gestures, passing a water container, lifting debris, checking on a companion, were magnified in meaning. Every act, no matter how small, contributed to a larger pattern. A human heartbeat against the void, relentless and defiant. From orbit, I marveled at their capacity to endure.
Fragile though they appeared, these humans were forces of nature, unpredictable and brilliant. No weapon we wielded, no calculation we executed could extinguish the spark they carried. Their courage radiated outward, a tangible force that bent circumstance around them. Each human's will was a node in a network of resilience that transcended mortality, fragile though their bodies were. They had converted vulnerability into advantage, weakness into strategy, and despair into ingenuity. I transmitted my observations continuously, knowing the importance of recording every detail. The human story was no longer a singular incident, it was an example, a universal principle. Any civilization that dismissed humanity as inconsequential would now be forced to acknowledge the anomaly they represented. The colony's survival became symbolic, a signal to the cosmos. No force can extinguish the determination of a species that refuses to bow. The humans had proven that survival is not a function of strength alone, but of adaptability, courage, and unity. Even as I observed, new threats loomed on the horizon. Scouts of distant fleets, unknown observers, and unpredictable cosmic events all threatened their fragile world. Yet I knew, with certainty, that these humans, though mortal, fragile, and tiny, would endure. Their spirit was a force no weapon could destroy, a principle that could not be calculated, quantified, or contained. They carried with them a resilience that transcended circumstance, a capacity for adaptation that bent the rules of survival itself. I felt awe and humility, emotions I had cataloged but rarely experienced. As an observer, I had witnessed countless species rise and fall, civilizations flourish and vanish, and yet none had displayed the combination of ingenuity, courage, and sheer willpower that I now saw in humans. Even the most advanced alien forces, the most precise calculations, could not overcome what they carried within themselves. And then it became clear, humans are more than creatures of flesh and bone. They are forces of nature, unpredictable and eternally defiant. Their existence challenges every assumption the galaxy holds about strength, intelligence, and survival. They are anomalies encoded into the fabric of the cosmos, catalysts for change in a universe governed by probability. Each human heartbeat reverberates far beyond their fragile bodies, influencing outcomes no one could foresee. As I departed orbit, leaving the humans to rebuild, recover, and prepare, I carried their story with me. A story of survival against impossible odds. A story of courage, unity, and ingenuity that could not be erased by fire, destruction, or calculation. They had not merely survived. They had inspired, transformed the impossible into reality, and left a mark that would ripple through space and time. The humans of Earth are not just survivors. They are anomalies, forces that bend circumstance, defy expectation, and endure eternally. The galaxy may have underestimated them, but now, having observed the events at this forgotten colony, I knew the truth. The humans are extraordinary. And somewhere, far beyond their fragile world, the cosmos would take notice.